And for analysis, I'm joined by James P. Moore Jr. He's the founder and CEO of the Washington Institute for Business, Government and Society. James, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Now, we just had a bit of a summary of the situation then. How can the Federal Reserve bring inflation under control, and at what cost?
Well, there certainly will be a cost because there's a need to see some kind of discipline put into the system that will allow us to be able to escape the grips of what may be stagflation. I think it's important to realize it was mentioned that they would probably raise this by about a half a point tomorrow, the interest rate. I think it's going to be more like 3/4 of a point tomorrow, and that is going to have a direct impact on markets and on inflation. It's quite extraordinary to realize over the past few years that the United States has actually spent over $5 trillion to be able to deal with the pandemic. And with literally billions of dollars now being put into the war in Ukraine, that's become a very difficult situation as well. So all this adds up, and it will ultimately have an impact on the American consumer.
So if we're talking about raising rates, the Fed has already raised rates twice this year. If it takes more drastic action, what does it look like? And in layman's terms, what does it mean for people in their everyday lives, for mortgages, business loans and employment?
Well, it's going to hold them back. It's going to hold them back from purchasing cars, from being able to take drives because of the high price of gasoline. They won't be buying a house in the near future. They'll be much pickier when it comes to purchasing groceries at the store. So it is going to have an impact. The question is how long and how deep will this impact be?
Now, some say that the central bank can still pull off a soft landing, a more sustainable path without causing a spike in unemployment and a complete economic collapse. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, we'll have to see because, quite frankly, some of the people who are in place today who are making these decisions have been around for a long time, and they've tried to adapt chapters from the old playbook into the current situation. And I think they've been surprised by the fact that the market reaction to decisions that they've made have not been as positive as they hoped or thought it would be. And so there's going to be, I think, a lot of consternation. I think once this hike tomorrow takes place, the markets will sit back, take a deep breath, and see exactly where they think that the economy is going. But I think it's also important to recognize that this is not something that is purely a problem that the United States has to deal with. This is being dealt with around the world. Australia is going to be raising its interest rates. We're going to be seeing a number of other countries doing likewise. And so it's a matter of fastening your seatbelt because it's going to be a bumpy ride.
Now, joblessness is at 3.6%, below the 4% level that Fed officials believe a healthy economy can sustain over the longer run. Tell us about the relationship between unemployment and rates and recessions.
This has been an unusual situation to be able to see the demand that is in the job market while at the same time inflation is taking off the way that it has. We haven't quite experienced anything like this. And certainly, most of us living today have only seen something like this happen once or twice in the past in terms of inflation being this dramatically increased over a short period of time. But this is going to be very interesting because ultimately those jobs are going to begin to, we're going to see that inflation is going to be a bit of a back cruncher when it comes to employment. But for the time being, I think we're going to see a healthy jobs market.
Now, we just heard in the report earlier that US President Joe Biden has said that the Fed is fully independent and he will not try and influence its decision like presidents have done in the past. Should the White House be taking more aggressive actions to improve, say, gas supply to try and offset inflationary pressures?
The answer is yes. As you may know, President Biden has announced today that he will be traveling, for example, to Saudi Arabia. It's a very controversial visit that he's making, but it is intended to be able to encourage the Saudis to increase the oil supply to be able to bring down the prices of oil. I think we're going to see a much more aggressive President Biden, and the reason for that is not only a desire to be able to help the American people, but also, quite frankly, we're facing midterm elections coming up in November. And if the economy continues to exist today the way that it has, it is absolutely clear that the Democrats will take over both houses of Congress, and that'll be a great concern to President Biden, who may be up for re-election 2 years thereafter.
James, really appreciate your insight there. James P. Moore Jr. for us.